Hello, Shirley Adams for the Sewing Connection, Series 16, Program 10. Looking through catalogs and magazines, you'll see that embroidered cut work is a popular technique. A new memory card which does this beautifully and automatically is magnificent and truly a wonder to watch. It's also a great teaching tool showing you how to do this on your own. In some fabrics, one layer is sufficient. Other fabrics, thin and colorful, might prompt the use of several so that different colors show through in different areas. All this type work needs a stabilizer underneath for well-defined, beautiful stitches. What started all this is this particular magazine picture that I have down here, and as I looked at it I thought, I have that fabric. The same color, the same weight. I have one that I can exactly duplicate in that. But I usually don't really duplicate things. I just sort of bounce off them and adapt them but do my own thing. But also about the time I saw that picture, I just got this new memory card, and it is just full of so many wonderful designs, and I can see things almost identical. The designs that are on that, they are almost the same as what's in this that you could buy commercially. Well, what also is nice that comes with that memory card is a whole set of templates. And because of all these templates, you can cut them out and use them, and you can find them here either singly or some of them are actually combined, so it suggests ways that you can make a whole picture out of it. What I like to do with those memory cards then is put them, or those templates, is put them where I want them on the fabric and arrange it just so, and that makes it so easy to do whatever I want to. Well, what I wanted to do was this vest. I've transferred that picture to this ultra suede vest back here, and I decided it'd be much easier if I didn't have any seams in it. So there aren't any side seams. I'm going to overlap the front and back of the pattern and make it all in one piece so that I can have continuous stitching going around it, continuous design. And what I wanted to do first of all is decide, okay, exactly how am I going to make this wavy design? Well, the easiest way down on your fabric is to just do this with a chalk wheel so that you can remove it. But here's how my pattern started out. It's just ordinary vest, and probably at least 20 or 30 or 40 vests I've made off this pattern. And what I've done is overlap the side seams. Now this vest had a little flare here at the side seams because of the dart. When I made this vest that I have there, I wasn't going to put any shape in it. I wasn't going to have any darts in it. Therefore, it didn't need to have these. That's why it's overlapped a little bit more at the bottom to eliminate that flare. And it just overlapped 1 1/4 inches at the top so that I'd have just a standard stitching line down the center of it. So it comes out the very same size as what I'm saying. The only stitching, the only seaming that will be done at all on that vest is later the shoulders will be overlapped and stitched through. So that's all. But I didn't want to cut this out initially exactly the same size as the vest because I'm going to put this in a hoop to do automatic embroidery on the machine. And if you cut it out right away, you don't have enough fabric there to get it in the hoop. So what I like to do is just, while I still had the pattern down there, just chalk a line with this chalk wheel where the actual vest is going to be, but I'm going to leave the rest of the fabric there intact so the hoop will hold it, and then later I can cut it out. And then I also want to know where exactly I want this little curvy line where these flowers will go. And so I just sort of drew a little curvy line here. If you decide, no, I don't quite like that, then erase it. It's just chalk after all, and do another line so that you can have whatever you do want. So once you have this curvy line traced exactly how you want the flowers, then you can take these little templates and put them on so that they kind of go along with this. So I might put one here, for instance, and the next one here. And there are only these two that I'm using, these two designs, and they're actually identical. One is just or almost identical. One is just the mirror image of the other. So you can arrange it back and forth. And after I get these two marked or embroidered, then I'd put these back on, and the next one I might do with this, and so on, and just alternate them. If they touch each other, fine. Where they don't touch each other, then I'm going to just put my own little embroidered line to connect them so that they look like one vine growing all the way around the vest. So it's just fun to take what is there and then do your own thing with it. What I would do with this is decide exactly where I want it. There would have to be a stabilizer under it because it makes a big difference on most fabrics. Now actually, when I did it on this synthetic suede, I did not put a stabilizer on it. And the reason for this is because those holes are very small. It isn't like cutting big holes out as you do in some places. There you definitely better have a stabilizer behind it. But this is small, but also this is heavy fabric. And it's not going to be lined. Both sides can show, and I didn't want to have any residue. Of course, you can use stabilizers that don't leave any residue. But anyway, on this, I didn't use a stabilizer. On everything else, every other kind of fabric, I will put a stabilizer there, some sort of a tearaway, so that it makes the nicest stitches. Well, anyway, to get this situated just the way I want it, if I, for instance, want the first one to be right here, then what I know about that is that right here where it makes this X and there's the up arrow, that means that if I would put this template on, the template that goes in the hoop or with the hoop, you can see how it has on this template a circle here. And where this little circle goes, that's where this is going to be centered. So I could put this on top of it so that it comes out just the way I want it to. And then I'd arrange it in the hoop and put the hoop right under it here and just sort of hold this in place and get the hoop to go under it. And when it just sits inside the hoop base there, and then I'd put this on top of it and clamp it in. And I know it's going to come out in exactly the place where I want it. So I would just do this, take the template out, of course, and also take this one out, and then it's ready to go over to the machine and be embroidered, and it'll come out exactly in that position. The next one is going to go maybe in a completely different position, and so the up direction won't be this way. The up direction in the next one would be going this way. So these templates are wonderful, and I really love to have them there. It makes the job so easy. Then later I am going to cut out the front in a little fancy shape. Not now though, remember, but because I'm here, I might as well show it to you right now. See how on this vest there's that fancy little shape around the edge? Well, this is wonderful with some of those decorative blades that you can get. And here I'm going to use this little tiara shape. I think it said on the package paper only, but cuts ultra suede very nicely, so it's just fine. And if you find, no, this is just really nice to hold in your hand. It holds very easily. But if you would like to have a little softer or a little more rubbery touch to hold it more securely, there's this one. And even though right now it has this big blade in it, it can click over twice. And as it clicks in twice, then it will hold a small blade as well as this large blade. So you can interchange them very easily. Well, with this one that I've decided to use, I would just go around however it curves around, however my line is, I would just go ahead then and cut this out and have that pretty little cut edge. So it's delightful to be able to do this on any fabric that doesn't ravel, as certainly this won't. So I wouldn't do that on this denim. You'd have a shaggy edge after you wash it, but on some of the non-ravelly things, it really is very nice to use. I'm going to go over here and do a little bit of this embroidery. I already have that memory card in the machine, and there are some marvelous designs on that. I really love it. There are a total of, I think about 45 designs that are on this, and I'm going to go through them. I'm not going to do some of these beautiful, elaborate things because they take too long. Now, what's very nice about it, you know exactly what to expect because in the memory card, in the package, on each design, it actually tells how many minutes it takes for each one. So what I'm going to do is one that takes very few minutes. I'm going to go to number 43 over here is what I'll touch. And this takes like 2 minutes. And the reason I'm doing such a quick one is because I'm sure you don't have time to sit here and watch the extensive ones, but they really are fun to just sit and watch. Now, I said that stabilizer is not necessary if it has small holes and if it's this synthetic suede. I'm under this one, though, it's going to be a bigger cutout area, and so I am going to use stabilizer, but not initially. And after this gets going, I'll tell you why. Do I have everything in shape? I do indeed. So I'll just push the automatic and let it get started. And once it gets going, I'm going to stop it so I can cut this tail off and then start it again. And this, I said, is a really nice learning tool. Now, the reason for that is because I really haven't done much cut work, and so it always helps to learn. Well, what I'm learning from this is, notice how it went around twice. It stitched this pattern twice. Now, this is really good if you are just going to draw your own design. I would therefore, because this really works well, I would therefore with my own design also stitch around it twice, and these stitching lines are probably, about scant 1/8 of an inch apart, somewhere between a 1/16 and an 1/8 of an inch apart. So I would do the same thing if I would just draw my own design, because I find this works well. What I need to do now is remove the hoop and cut out that part. I better cut the thread here first before I move it. I want to cut out that middle part, and then I'll put it back in and embroider it. And to cut out that middle part, I find that it's just a lot more difficult if you have the stabilizer under it and try to cut this fabric only without cutting through the stabilizer. It's difficult to do that. Well, it isn't that hard, but it's a whole lot easier anyway if you just go ahead and cut it without anything and then slide the stabilizer under it afterwards. Now, this is not true if I use multiple layers. This is only true when I'm using one layer and having a complete hole going through it. This is when this is true. I'd put the stabilizer in after this initial step is cut out. Now, what this initial step was is simply reinforcement so that it holds the fabric in place before it embroiders. And you want to cut just as close to those stitches as you possibly can, because if you don't cut real close, I'll show you in a minute what happens. I have one already embroidered where I really didn't cut close enough to it, and it doesn't look as pretty as it should. So I like to show you all the pitfalls so that you don't make the same ones. Okay, once we have all this cut right up to the corner, then it's ready to go back in and actually be embroidered. And as it's embroidered, then it needs to have this stabilizer under it so that it really gets a nice full stitch. What happens if you do not put a stabilizer under it, and I'll just put it in and go ahead and start it and then show you so that it's on its merry way. Okay, what happens if you do not have that stabilizer in, and if I don't pull this thread through a little bit more, we aren't going to have any stitches at all. Okay, let me get it through here. It had pulled off short when I cut it. It bounced off. Okay. There we go, and now it's ready to go, and I'll just push the button again and let it embroider. And I'll just stay on here until it moves past where I can get the thread cut. Whoops, it's going the other direction. I hadn't expected that. Okay, now I can cut the thread. But notice how it's doing a really nice wide stitch here. This is what happens if you would do it without stabilizer under it. Here's one that I already did, and notice how narrow this is. It isn't as wide as it should be, or as wide as it is over here. And the reason for that is because I cut out both the stabilizer and the fabrics when I did this. And you really don't want to do that. You want to have stabilizer there. So it's difficult to cut just one layer and not all of it, but this is what you really want to do. Now, this is where I've used 3 layers, and I had just, an assortment of fabrics here. A couple of silks and a microfiber is what I see I have here, and then the stabilizer under it. And then what is a little bit more complex is not cutting all the way through it, but instead just cutting through one layer at a time, so that you can see I cut one layer down, and there's where the turquoise shows through. And then as I cut 2 layers down on this side, the purple shows through. But notice here how I didn't cut this quite far enough, and a little tag end of where I didn't cut it shows there. So it's always good to make a practice sample, is what I'm saying, so that you know exactly what you should do. And it's saying, look at me, I'm finished. And so we'll just take it out and look at it here. but you can see this little moon is embroidered very nicely, and I'll cut off that thread and we can get it out of the machine. And then of course you can take away the stabilizer afterwards. So this was just a quick little design. There are wonderful elaborate designs that you'd have to stay with me a little longer today in order to do the more elaborate ones. But then you just take it out of the hoop, tear off the stabilizer, and you've got this nice little cut work done, and done so beautifully. And with the stabilizer off. And anytime I have a hard time getting stabilizer out of little places, I kind of like to take a tapestry needle. And if you lose that tapestry needle, I always put a piece of yarn through mine because I use this so often that sort of points it out in the drawer. And then I can just get rid of this easily. It helps me tear it out. So keep one of these handy. I use it so many different places. But anyway, once the stabilizer is all torn out, it does a really nice job, and I didn't completely tear it out yet, but it does a nice job, and it keeps that embroidery wide as opposed to without stabilizer it gets narrower. So this is how you can do it through several layers. Now you of course have to cut this very, very carefully as you're doing this, because you want to just, if you're going to do multiple layers this way, you just want to get one layer, so you do it very carefully. And of course you do this before you do the embroidery, so get close to those initial stitches. And here are a couple of others that are done the same way in that they had multiple layers up here. Now notice in this one I've used these fans, and I didn't actually need the template to put them joining the way I did on the suede one, but I did want these fans to go different directions. So for that point, from that standpoint, it was good to have this template so I could see exactly where the up arrow is there. And this one I wanted to put at a different angle. And the little fan down there I wanted to put upside down. And then after I was completely finished, and after I had cut out the top layer, you can see that the lame layer shows through underneath. And I used 3 different colors of thread here. So that's a possibility too, to do some changing, and you use different thread colors. Afterwards then, when it was completely finished, then I did that stitch that goes back, that stretch stitch. It goes forward a couple of stitches and back one and keeps moving, so that I'd have a heavy stitch, just to have a little cord that joined all these fans circling around there. Another one, I used a couple of designs over here. And this one, I used this upper design and cut, I didn't have different enough colors that you can tell, but I actually have 3 layers here. There's a kind of a magenta and a purple that go under this bright fuchsia. And I've just combined a couple of things. I don't know if they were supposed to be combined or not, but they make, I don't know, kind of a fanciful kite or butterfly or some sort of since we have antenna there, some sort of an insect anyway. Where it's difficult, where you have to do a little bit more work and have nice sharp little scissors so you can get right to the tips of them, is when you have little teeny holes like this to cut out. Then of course they're going to be more difficult than the bigger spaces are. But all this is doable, and I just wanted to show you some different possibilities there by using different layers of fabric. Now these take such small scraps, you don't have to have those other fabrics the whole big size of whatever your project is. You just need to insert a little scrap here or there wherever it's going to be, since it can be cut away later. Well, I like to learn from one project and transfer it to another. And so what I learned on one project, I kind of transferred to this. Again, it was just a scrap of that suede. But here also I can see, or I want to show you what the difference is. Here's the same little flower. This is done with the stabilizer under it. This is done without. And it makes just a world of difference. You're wasting your time on most fabrics if you don't use that stabilizer. The stitches aren't as pretty, the quality isn't as nice. So be sure you always do get a stabilizer there. Well, what I am learning on this one by using the automatic capabilities and embroidering it, I want to transfer to something else. So what I had is this denim that I'm wearing, and it had all these flowers embroidered on it. And so I thought, with all those flowers on it, why don't I just cut out some spaces and do the same thing? Now, I'm not even going to need a memory card for this, because I'm going to use what's already here in the fabric. You can see a lot of fabrics like this, and so it's not a bad idea to just change them a little bit, because maybe a whole lot of people buy this fabric, but yours is going to be different than anyone else's if you do some changes. And what I'm going to do is go back to the menu, because I'm going to take off this foot, and put on another foot, because I'm going to do a little bit of just free hand there and not use what's automatic. And the foot that I want here is the one where I can see exactly what I'm doing. So this is going to be an open-toed foot, and I can see exactly where the needle's going down each time. And then also back here, I'm going back to the menu, because I want to bring this back to ordinary sewing. Now what the carriage just did is get the feed dog up again, because of course it had put it down for automatic embroidery. Now it's back in play again, and what I want is a zigzag stitch, and I want this to be pretty close together. Let's see, I think I will take it down to, right now it's kind of wide, it's on 5 millimeters. I'm going to take it down to, about 2.5, and I'm going to take the stitch length down so that the stitches are close together. I want this all the way down to about 3.5, maybe about 3, since I'm using a contrast of threads, and you'll be able to see it. And this also does need a stabilizer. Now because this is already denim, it's already kind of heavy fabric, and I'm putting a stabilizer under it, I really don't need to have a hoop. With other fabrics I might want to put this in a hoop, not the automatic embroidery hoop, but just a round hoop that you'd use for anything, any kind of handwork. So I'm going to pick out a leaf here that looks likely and cut it out first before I put it over the, because it already has that initial step. It already has some stitching around here. So I'm just going to cut out this leaf right here, and I'm going to have to cut out that vein in the middle also, because I can hardly leave it there, it won't stay. But it's kind of fun to see how you can take fabric that's already done and rework it to your own design, which is what I'm doing here. And so I'll just cut this as close as I can to their stitches. Now they used big heavy cord as they did this stitching so that it would show up, and they also used really big stitches, but even though those stitches are big, I'm cutting pretty close, and as long as you don't handle it very much, then it's going to be all right. And what I want to do is just trace over that. And after you do one and experience it and see how it works, then you can go on and cut out just as much as you want to. So on this vest, I cut out several things. I decided some of these big flowers I really couldn't cut out because there's all this work in the middle, and I thought I better leave that there. But I did cut out a lot of these little round holes, and I cut out every leaf that I could. And it just was a fun project to do this. This is kind of relaxing work. I'm going to start right at one corner, move my chair over. Gee, when I'm not doing the automatic embroidery, I've got to get right in front of it and watch what I'm doing here. Okay, so with the stabilizer under it and with it set and everything looks like it's go, we'll just go ahead and do this. And if I find out it's too close, but it isn't, that 0.3 looks like it's about right because it's a contrasting color. If I had used white on this, I would probably just go ahead and make those stitches a little bit farther apart, but it's a good idea to be close together when you're using a color that shows up. Anytime you're doing this manually, when you come to the end here, I want the needle down position, because when I come right to the corner, I want it down on the outside there, and I'm going to lift with the knee lift and turn and do a couple of stitches here as I go beyond it, and then I'll probably turn it again a little bit so that I can just come around this leaf. But I always want to end up on the outside there so that it does a nice job and so that everything joins and you have a nice fluid line. Don't get any little jerky lines. And if you do have some little blips here and there as you're doing this manually, then just go over it again and do it, redo it, and you can do it very nicely the next time. But readjust when you need to. Just remember with any of these things, don't be in a hurry. Do the job well, and about one more stitch. There we go. And turn again, and it just does a really nice job. But I did learn by using that automatic card first how would be the best way to do any of these things. So anytime you do any process, it's a learning tool really, and you just learn from one operation and transfer it to something else you're doing, and hopefully remember it. and hopefully remember any of the mistakes you make along the way, because we learn more by our mistakes probably than any other way. I have another garment behind me so you can see how this works out anyway. I'll just poke out the inner or the stabilizer behind it, and you can see that this works out the same as the vest I'm wearing. Well, this one that's behind me, you saw briefly a couple of programs ago as I was looking at mesh. And what I have done here is combine some rayon fabric with this mesh. And where they overlap is where I did some cut work. And you can see in that automatic overlap, that's this design right here that I have used. You can see in that there is the mesh showing behind it. The hole doesn't come all the way through, so that means you have to cut very carefully. And then after I had that done, that's when I decided to do just some freehand work. And so I drew my own design, put it down, and you can either trace it on your fabric, or if you want to, you can just stitch those initial reinforcement lines right through the paper, tear the paper off, and then go ahead and do all the zigzag, the satin stitch. Well, cut work can appear anywhere on a garment for a really, really pretty look, but where everybody actually looks is at your face. The area surrounding it, therefore, is very noticeable, the neckline. Next time, let's see how you can change and design any neckline from a basic standard.